We'll start out, I'm going to tell you that I fell in love with Penstemons right away when we moved from the Pacific Northwest because we don't have them so much there in the wet. They like a nice dry environment. And when we got here to New Mexico, I saw them in the wild, and I quickly discovered, ooh, these will even reseed in quite a great way in your own gardens. And so I started putting them into my garden, and I have quite a collection of them now. And I just love them. Everybody loves Penstemons because how can you not? They have these big, tall stalks of, colorful bloomings, and they're pretty steady. So I'm going to start out with this first slide, and you can see that the Penstemons are now in the, and I'm going to totally screw up the Latin here, but the Plantagenaceae, which is a plantain family, but it was formerly for a long, long time, the Scrophulariaceae figwort, better known as figwort family. And the Penstemons got moved like a lot of different plants have been moved as they further understood where they fell in the botanical world. So, let's see the next. These pictures, these Penstemons are all from my garden, and I came back from a trip, and in mid-May, and I literally just had a super bloom. I guess we had such great rain while I was gone, and as you know, it was a pretty wet spring, so everything just went crazy. There's over 300 species of Penstemons. So it's a pretty big family. There's approximately 45 or more species that can be found right here in New Mexico, and they're especially adapted. They love the high and dry climate, and they also like our rocky and alkali types of soil. So they just flourish here. What you see in this photo is our New Mexico Rocky Mountain strictus, and like many of the family, Penstemons are a rapidly evolving genus. They're quite variable even within their own species, and so ID can sometimes be very difficult, and they're kind of prolifically crossbreeding with each other, so you get these little odd ones, and the colors sometimes change on you, but that's a pretty good selection of the strictus right there, one of our more common. The height of the plants and the number of flowers, they're going to vary quite a bit from a dry year to a wet year. And like I said, when I came back from our trip and we drove into our driveway, it was just a super bloom because of the wet spring. Characteristics for how to identify Penstemons are that the flowers are tube-shaped, and they end in 5 petals. The petals usually form with 2 at the top and 3 at the bottom. Sometimes there's variations on that, but that's a typical Penstemon blossom. And each flower has 2 pairs of fertile stamens, so 4 stamens that are fertile, and a 5th enlarged stamen, which is sterile, and it's called the stamenod. And that's another reason they would call them Penstemons, 5 stamen. The stamenod, the sterile large one that comes out, is often bearded, and it's like a little brush, and it also helps with the pollinators. They brush up against the brush. And so another common name for the Penstemons are beard tongues, and you'll often hear that used, the great western beard tongues. A lot of the Penstemons grow with an evergreen basal mat of leaves, and then it sends its stalk of flower blooms up from there. But there are a number of Penstemons that grow in a more of a shrubby style, more bushy in growth. Here is one of my more healthy mother Penstemons. It's a Penstemon palmerii, and it's It grows somewhat in a basil, but a little bit shrubbier. You can see it's sending up very, very tall stalks of big, pink, fluffy flowers. Those flowers are so big bumblebees will just disappear in them. I mean, they're just an enormous flower. And they continue for quite a while. I have this growing, it's this same plant. It's been there about 3 or 4 years now, and it just keeps getting shrubbier and sending up more and more stalks and then seeding them all over the place, but that's okay. And you can see it's just sitting in a sort of a swale that my husband and I built with pink quartz. I mean, it's the most unfertile place in the world, and it loves it, you know. So I don't know. They're just very insane, these Penstemons. And there's a close-up of the flower. It's got these sort of little dark purple patches in there, and you can see that big brushy stameni right there in the middle of it. There is a bee on the side there, but it didn't quite come out. Anyway, so that's the palmer. The next slide is a Penstemon strictus, again, our Rocky Mountain penstemon, very common, but it's a beautiful flower. It's just got this deep blue violet color, and you see them in the wild, and they're just wonderful. They seed quite freely, they crossbreed quite freely. The leaves are a dark green. They start again as a basil, and then they send up the stalks. The stalks also have more narrow green leaves that come with it, but it's a beautiful plant. This next slide is a close-up of the Penstemon clutei. It's one of my favorites because of the deep magenta pink color, and it's also got a long flowering stem, big, large, deep pink flowers, and if you look where my little finger is holding up that one blossom, one of the characteristics to identify the clutei is it has a little white rim on those bottom 3 petals. So it has a tendency to look a little bit like some other Penstemons, including the palmer, but the color is much deeper. But before it blooms, it kind of looks like it's coming up as a palmer because the leaves are similar. Okay. And there is the clutei in mass, again, in the most unfertile place at the bottom of a loose rock wall. I never really water down there, and it's underneath this big cedar tree we have. But they just kind of appeared, actually. I never really planted those, and I don't remember throwing the seeds out. But about 3 seasons ago, I started seeing them, and I thought, oh, I guess the palmer has blown over onto the other side of the house, and it's now going to bloom there. Well, no, the blooms started coming. I go, wait a minute, this is not a palmer. These are way deeper colored. But anyway, they've continued to enjoy this little spot, and they keep reseeding, and the same plants will reflower season after season. So I love them. Here's a very different type of Penstemon. It grows more like a little moundy mat. It's Penstemon pinifolius, and it's got an evergreen mat. You'll see it green during the winter, underneath the snow even. And the flowers are long and narrow and quite prolific as it's blooming. This one is a yellow blooming version, but those little flowers will also, you can see them in scarlet, like a scarlet or sort of an orangey red, and sometimes on the same plant. It'll start out yellow, and then oddly, I don't know if there's some little crossbreeding sex going on here with another red one, but the same plant will the blossom will slowly start to go orange. So in the end, it's orange, but it starts yellow. So do you know why? Have you had that experience with pinifolius? Okay, I don't know. There's a lot of sex in this garden. I think with all these penstemons. Anyway, I think they're really, really nice, and they make a nice ground cover too. They'll spread quite a bit. Okay, next. Here's an example of an interesting penstemon, the pure white one there on the right, next to a small, just starting out to bloom strictus. And the one on the right is another version of a strictus, but it's in pure white, and they call it blanca peak. And I believe I got it from David Salmon, who found it, I think, in Colorado, and they named it after Blanca Peak. And it's very sweet. I planted it a couple of seasons ago, and I thought I lost it, and it never really bloomed the first time I put it in. I saw a picture of what it was supposed to be, and then it kind of disappeared. But then this year on this super bloom, here it comes, and it bloomed white, and I went, there it is. There's that Blanca Peak I put in a couple seasons ago. So they can kind of fool you, these flowers. Okay, next. Ooh. And here is the it's somewhat common, very common in the wild, and it's another popular one here in New Mexico. It's the Penstemon barbatus, and it grows again from a small, kind of basally, thin-leafed plant, and then it sends up its stalks, and they're very tall and upright, and they start to fill with these little delicate red flowers. The lower petal of the lobe, if you can see it there, it'll distinguish itself from other types of red penstemons that look kind of like this when they're starting to bloom. But if you can see from the side, the lower two lobes will curl under, and it looks kind of like a shark swimming from the side. And they sometimes call them shark's head penstemons because of that. Okay, and next. And here's another beautiful, gorgeous penstemon. Penstemon pseudospectabilis, and it's the big, bushy, pink one next to a strictus there, who's in the way on the side. That's okay. And this is a much bushier growth. It has thick leaves again, but sends up many, many, many stalks full of those beautiful magenta-colored blooms. And what else about that? Let's see. I think I got this one from you. You gave me one, and I transplanted it, and I now have two of them, and they're thriving. They're just sitting in a bunch of rocks and bad soil, and they love it. So that's the pseudospectabilis.
Is it a common name or desert penstemon?
Desert.
Okay.
Desert sunset or desert?
Desert penstemon.
Desert. Okay. And then next, and here's a close-up of that flower. And you see it's a little different than the clutei. It's more narrow, and it doesn't have that little white cup on the bottom. But it kind of looks like the clutei also. Beautiful, beautiful pink color. So those are a few photos I shot in my garden in the last month. They're almost all done blooming. They're almost starting to drop their petals already. They're just sort of a kind of a flash in the pan kind of a flower, you know? They just get going in the spring, and that's it. I don't know if you have any questions. I'm not an expert, but I can answer any questions about them. I encourage you to grow penstemons. They're just a beautiful, beautiful western wildflower, and they thrive in our climate here.